It's always an honor, a privilege, a pleasure to welcome back our friend Ann Coulter to the program. She wrote the book, Adios, America, and I was reading your column today. I really enjoy reading your columns. You're one of my favorite columnists because you're so iconoclastically irreverent. And
thank you.
I didn't know you were writing another book, and you're writing a book about Trump. What is it?
It's on our next president, yes.
Well, okay, details. What is it about?
Well, our next president. And technically, what I said in the column was true. It was due yesterday. It was not turned in yesterday, but I think it will be turned in.
Listen, this is how long. Tomorrow. This is how long we've been friends. We've been friends. I remember way back in the day, and this is over a decade ago, where you used to talk about, I can't write books anymore because I sit there and I just chain smoke cigarettes as I write them, and you haven't done that in over a decade, right?
Well, I never said I couldn't write books. I've always loved the writing and research. It's my favorite thing to do. But it is true that after the first three, there was high crimes and misdemeanors, then slander, and then treason. And those were all things that had been, burbling up in me for, it seems like, my whole life. I was writing about Joe McCarthy when I was in college. And starting with I thought I'd gotten everything out of my system. So starting with treason, and all of my friends will tell you this because every time I say it again, they remind me I've said it about the last 8 books. I'll say, okay, that's it. I got nothing else in me, nothing new to say. And I do always think that. I mean, I never go about writing a book by saying, I need to write a book. Let me think of a subject. It's always that something is just presented to me, thrown in my lap, something important I need to research and point out. And I think that's true with Donald Trump. As you know, I was an early adopter. From the moment he gave that Mexican rapist speech, he had my heart, and I never turned away. Slowly the rest of the world is catching up, and I think they will have caught up by November.
I got to tell you, like when he took on the media this week, I find his strength inspiring, and I'll tell you what you can compare it to. You can compare it to McCain, who wouldn't bring up Reverend Wright. You can compare it to McCain, who agonized over bringing up Ayers and Dorn. You can compare it to Bob Dole's campaign. I am tired of Republicans being slandered and besmirched and attacked for things that are absolutely false, that they're racist and sexist, and poor Mitt Romney carried around women's resumes and he wanted to hire them. What an awful human being he was.
No, we've never seen anything like Trump before, and it came not a moment too soon. I think, as he said in his opening speech, the country is getting very close to the tipping point where it will be unsalvageable. One of the things I really admire about Trump that I also admired about Reagan, and I will say this, Mitt Romney, most people who run for president, it's just the next step. It's like running for student council. This is what they've done their whole lives. Reagan and Trump were making their lives immeasurably worse by running for president. They didn't have to do it, and far more in the case of Donald Trump than the other two, either Reagan or Mitt Romney. In that first week, Donald Trump lost hundreds of millions of dollars by saying true and important things about illegal immigration. For speaking the truth, he lost deals with Macy's, with Univision, with NBC. And what did he do this week, by the way? I hear the PGA Tour pulled out on one of his
They're going to Mexico.
Courses.
Yeah.
I just sat back and thought, wait, what did he do? Did I miss some other great statement of his? It's just, it's never ending. But this has been part, from what I can tell, part of his personality his whole life. I never realized it until that announcement speech. I never really thought much about him until that announcement speech. But he is a problem solver, and people I know who have known him and been in meetings with him, they say, throughout these meetings of reports, he'll look bored, he'll be throwing, spitballs, as everything, the good news is being reported on. And as soon as someone will say something like, on this other issue, well, this is a big problem, suddenly he'll, come alive, and he's like RoboCop. He loves solving stuff. And I think that's what he looked at our country and said, we need someone to speak the truth. And, oh, my gosh, you are so right about him not backing down to the media. This is not an incidental point. No one has ever done this before. Political correctness is kind of recent. I think Reagan probably would have, but it didn't really... political correctness has really taken off in the last 10 years. And the bossy, arrogant media not only sneering and humiliating Republicans, but sneering and mocking the American people. Trump doesn't let them do that with his supporters. He stands for truth, and he stands with his supporters.
I like the strength. It's actually hilarious to watch. Trump's alarming view of the press must not be tolerated. Some guy named Rem Ryder writing for USA Today, and I'm like,
great.
No, it's got to. Not only is it tolerated, he called them. Do you see that scum in the back of the room? Just because it's true. And we learned a lot about.
Lamas, one of my faves, a sleaze. Lamas was the last time I was on your show. I was talking about Tom Lamas on ABC World News Tonight. Described, Juanita Broderick. Your listeners surely know all about that story, and said that her claim to have been raped by Bill Clinton was, I quote, discredited. I've been trolling him on Twitter to ask him, what's your evidence? Do you have some new evidence in this case that none of us have heard about? No word back from him yet, and I'm pretty sure it was Tom Lamas whom Trump said, oh my gosh, that press conference was so magnificent. Anyone who hasn't seen it, you ought to go online and watch it. It's linked about a dozen times on my Twitter feed. But he was reading from all of the veterans organizations he's given to. He was responding to lies from the media to say where the $5,600,000 had been distributed to these various veterans groups. And he would periodically interrupt his listing of where the money had gone just to take a shot at the press.
Let me give you a list here, because, as you know, I have interviewed him as much as anybody, and I have really, in spite of criticism against me, I have asked him every question that I could possibly think of. And I have pinned him down a number of times on where he stands on the issues. He explained his position, how he converted to being pro-life, and he's very pro-Second Amendment.
He explained that in the first debate beautifully.
Yeah, he really did. And he gave the list of justices that he put on the Supreme Court. He's promised, here's his agenda. He's pro-life, pro-Second Amendment. He gave us a list of justices, a pool of justices, his names he pulled from when making Supreme Court appointments. He promises to rebuild the military. He's identified radical extremists as an enemy that we need to bomb the out of. He said he'd fix the VA, build the wall and secure the border, repeal and replace Obamacare. He's leaning, and his website says healthcare savings accounts. He says he wants to expand coal, drilling, fracking, nuclear, and all other technology. He said he'd end Common Core and send education back to the states. He said he'd negotiate free and fair trade deals, better trade deals. And
if I could interrupt for a moment.
One last thing. That's one more. And he pledged to balance the budget. What is not conservative?
All of that could be said by any other candidate running for president as a Republican, except the trade deals. I noticed you didn't mention anything about immigration. I think his
I did. I said build the wall
can be summarized in a single sentence. He will put America first, last, and always, and he will do it. And he doesn't care that the press and the entire media will scream bloody murder about it. He cares about Americans first, not foreigners first. I mean, well, I don't know if your listeners heard the beginning of my segment here, you had that speech from Hillary going on and on about how she's done this, she's done that. I couldn't even listen. I was falling asleep, and a peace deal here, and I pushed for the rights of women in this country and that country. No, this is the typical politician listing these tiny little specifics. We don't want
to hear that. But I believe it. But I believe him.
What we want is the core central organizing philosophy, and Donald Trump is the first person since Ronald Reagan to come along and say he's putting our interests first, whether it's on trade or immigration or flinging troops around the world for pointless wars that end up turning out worse than they were when we went in. Although I do blame the failure of the Iraq War, not on the war, but on Obama's withdrawal, and I hate him for that. But What can you do? I mean, going forward, having seen that Obama could destroy a victorious war by being elected and pulling out every last troop, does that encourage you to do it again?
No, just the opposite. But I think you missed my point. Is like he's saying specific things. And you're right. I like the idea of America first. I went through a series of statistics. So Obama yesterday attacked Fox News and attacked talk radio. And then he made this idiotic comment that we're better off economically by almost every economic measure. Nothing could be further from the truth.
You're right.
And then you've got a dishonest media, and everything boomerangs back when they attack Trump. The New York Times, it boomeranged back. The women supported him, and then it exposed that they don't interview Broderick and Willie and Juanita and Paula Jones. Then you've got, ABC and NBC, and you've been tweeting about this, how Juanita Broderick rape claim was discredited. It was never discredited, ever, by anybody, ever.
And Trump is pointing it out, and the American people have seen this. Even whether you are liberal or conservative, the lies from the media, the always putting Americans last, the blaming Americans for everything, not caring for Obama to come out. Look, I'm sorry for any listeners. If you're a Democrat and you're voted for Obama, okay, fine, but unless you live in Washington or New York City and happen to work on Wall Street, that isn't true in your life. Your life has gotten worse, and that president, that party, and I got to tell you, most of my party do not care about you. This is the first man who's come along who cares about ordinary Americans and doesn't care what the press says, doesn't care what his neighbors say, doesn't care that he's being attacked from absolutely every media outlet.
What do you say to the David Frenches of the world? What do you say to these other people that want to run third party and help Hillary? Because Bill Kristol is pissing me off.
Well, I think it shows that they were never really serious about the stuff you and I care about in the first place, Sean. I mean, just to take one example, I'm sure you've talked about it, but it's a pretty darn important example. There is absolutely no question that if Hillary Clinton is elected, she will appoint probably up to 3 or 4 Supreme Court justices, and you know damn well what the first thing is they're going to do. She has said it. Liberals have said it. They will call up District of Columbia versus Heller. The first time the Supreme Court acknowledged the meaning of the Second Amendment, I don't think gun groups even supported that case going to the Supreme Court because we were getting along fine. Don't want to risk it. Supreme Court may say you have to be in a militia, and there are no militias, so there's no Second Amendment. If they overturn Heller, and they are absolutely dead set determined to, that is the end of the Second Amendment in America. There's no question about that. To risk allowing Hillary to get into the White House, I would also add at this point, you know quite well, I was adamantly, ferociously opposed to John McCain, and when it was down to Obama, Hillary, and McCain, I was for Hillary over McCain because McCain would have given us amnesty, and that would have been.
You want to hear something funny? Only because
it would have been too late even for Trump to save if McCain had gotten in and pushed through amnesty. In any event, when the time came to it, when it was Obama versus McCain. Okay, I started a website, getdrunkandvoteformccain.com, but I did it. I voted for McCain. My friend John Phillips on radio got drunk, used a breathalyzer, and filled out his absentee ballot for McCain. We did it, and we weren't happy about it. And these little brats, they accuse us, conservatives of principle, of being upset when they run execrances for president and we vote for their guys. Now they're taking their ball and going home. No, it's outrageous. It shows they never really cared about the Second Amendment. They never really cared about abortion. They never really cared about this country.
Newt Gingrich had a great line, and I got to let you go after this. He said, Donald Trump is the first genuine outsider in my lifetime. Now, Newt's been around a while. To take on the entire national establishment in both the Republican and Democratic parties. And what's beginning to be obvious is it's a huge establishment. And I've said this, I didn't realize how deep it was. And by the way, it's a corrupt establishment, and it's an establishment that pays off each other. And it's an establishment that does all types of insider deals. And you see the incestuous nature between the media, et cetera. But I got to go.
Yeah, it goes right up
by the way,
you're
making it impossible for me to fulfill your mother's wishes. My
mother never said this.
Yes,
to
she
you.
did. She did so.
Sean,
you went to the bathroom. We were going. I went out.
Care.
Ann Coulter's a pisser. She's like the sister that I never had. You know.